Imagine the cold, not outside, but within the walls of absolute power. Imagine standing inside the Forbidden City on a winter night.
3 great halls dominate the outer court, standing on a 3-tiered marble terrace. The centerpiece is the imposing Hall of Supreme Harmony.
The wind cuts through red walls, frost creeps across marble floors, and the air feels sharp enough to steal your breath. These magnificent castles, built to house the Son of Heaven, were paradoxically colder and more lethal than the world outside. The horrifying truth? Most people today wouldn't survive a single night inside its grand, freezing halls. These were palaces of power, yet often colder than the deepest dungeon. So how did emperors, concubines, and the tireless guards endure nights that could freeze a man where he lay? How did people sleep in imperial castles without freezing to death? The answer lies not in simple luxury, but in a brilliant, desperate combination of survival technology, cultural philosophy, and relentless human labour. Let's begin with the basic problem. The Forbidden City was not designed for warmth. It was designed for awe. Chinese imperial architecture, from the Han palaces at Chang'an to the Ming and Qing Forbidden City, was designed for scale and intimidation, not insulation. This emphasis on symbolism over sustainability created a chilling environment. Vast halls were built to impress subjects and intimidate envoys. Ceilings soared 20 metres above the floor. Courtyards were open to the sky, aligned in north-south grids that channeled the icy winds of the northern steppe straight through the palace grounds. This intentional exposure was an architectural reflection of the emperor's cosmic mandate, yet it was thermally devastating. Walls were stone or brick, sometimes lined with glazed tiles, but rarely insulated. Floors were slabs of marble or hard-packed earth. Once they absorbed the winter cold, they radiated it back, turning the inner chamber into a stone refrigerator that retained the chill for days. In medieval Europe, nobles often retreated to smaller, heavily insulated stone keeps with large fireplaces that burned timber for instant visible heat. China, by contrast, preferred vast timber-framed halls, making open fireplaces a massive fire hazard. Their solution was far more ingenious and far less visible. Heating relied on fire, but it had to be contained. Instead of a central hearth, heat came from braziers and one uniquely Chinese invention, the Kang bed. The Kang was not furniture, it was survival technology. This raised brick or stone platform had flues built underneath. Fires lit at one end, often located outside the room to minimize smoke, sent hot air through the flues, warming the surface. People spread mats and quilts across the top and slept on the gently radiating warmth. In northern China, where winter temperatures could plunge below lethal freezing points, the Kang was the primary engine of survival. In the imperial chambers, Kang platforms could be the size of entire rooms, heated by charcoal stoves fed by servants. Emperors often slept on Kangs lined with thick quilts and silken layers, the warmth carefully regulated. But imagine the junior eunuch in the outer guard quarters. They often slept on plain wooden boards or straw mats, relying on small braziers and shared body heat to get through the night. But the greatest threat to life wasn't the frost seeping from the walls, it was the very fire meant to keep them alive. The palace's hidden enemy was odorless and silent. Braziers, metal bowls filled with glowing charcoal, were ubiquitous. They were carried from room to room, providing tiny pockets of warmth in otherwise cavernous spaces. Concubines and noble ladies placed them near beds, while officials huddled around them during late-night discussions. But braziers were a constant killer. Carbon monoxide poisoning was a constant, bureaucratic risk in poorly ventilated rooms. The danger was so routine it was documented. Records from the Ming Dynasty note several deaths caused not by the winter exposure, but by suffocation from charcoal smoke. Palace servants were trained to monitor braziers carefully, feeding them just enough fuel to last through the night without overwhelming the air. This was a vigilance that demanded their life. Beds themselves were fortresses of warmth. Four-poster beds with thick, heavy curtains were common among the nobility. The curtains trapped body heat, creating a sealed internal tent of warmth inside vast, freezing rooms. Imperial bedding was an exercise in extreme layering. Beds were layered with thickened silks, wool padding, and dense furs like sable, fox, or rabbit. Quilts, known as bay, were stuffed with cotton or feathers. The emperor's bedding was sometimes so heavy that attendants had to physically help him tuck in the layers, sealing the warmth like closing a vault against the night. Clothing at night was equally vital. The rule was absolute. You did not undress to sleep. Cotton-padded jackets and trousers served as nightwear. Wool socks, fur-lined boots, and quilted robes were kept close at hand. Head coverings were essential. Heat escapes quickly from the scalp. Nightcaps and padded earmuffs were worn by men and women alike. Servants made survival possible. Before bedtime, eunuchs and maidservants prepared chambers by lighting stoves and arranging quilts. This was a life or death service, a testament to Confucian duty that demanded suffering for the elite's comfort. Imagine a young eunuch, hands already cracked by the cold, carrying ceramic jars filled with boiling water. They would wrap these jars in cloth and slide them between sheets to act as primitive, hot water bottles. Heated stones, too, were tucked into bedding to pre-warm mattresses. Some high officials wrote that the greatest luxury in winter was slipping into a bed already warmed hours earlier by unseen hands. Attendants had to stay awake through the night, stoking fires, adjusting braziers, and replacing water jars. Their constant vigilance was the silent, unseen barrier between the emperor and a lethal night. But in a cruel twist of fortune, the servants often fared better than the nobles. The palace's hierarchy of comfort was about to be flipped by the simple thermodynamics of heat. Yet paradoxically, the highest rank did not always guarantee the warmest room. For the imperial household, status could equal greater exposure. Noble chambers, perched in high towers or exposed wings, were often colder than the servants' quarters. Grand windows designed to showcase wealth let in drafts. Paper screens offered little insulation. Compare this to Japan's traditional winter homes, where sliding shoji doors were replaced with thick fusuma, and the central irori hearth provided a consistent, communal source of warmth. In the Chinese palace, cooks and stable boys often slept in warmer conditions near the constant, radiating heat of kitchens or the living body warmth of livestock pens. Warmth in the palace was less about status than pure, simple location and functional necessity. The imperial guards of China's great palaces endured some of the most unforgiving nights in history. Imagine yourself as a Qing guard on the wall, facing the north wind, performing your Confucian duty. Stationed on walls, watchtowers, and massive gates, they stood directly in the path of the steppe winds. Unlike the emperor, they had no heated kangs, no silken quilts. Their only protection was thick, padded cotton armour issued for winter duty. Survival depended on relentless, deliberate movement. Guards marched back and forth, stamped their feet on the frozen flagstones, and swung their arms. Some carried small hand braziers, warming fingers just long enough to operate a weapon. Others tucked heated stones inside their sleeves. A flask of spiced wine was sometimes passed between comrades, not to warm them. Alcohol actually lowered their core temperature, but simply to dull the raw edge of the biting cold. The penalty for failing was harsh. In the words of the palace code, a guard's failure was treason. A guard who nodded off or abandoned his post faced flogging, dismissal, or even execution. In Imperial service, the cold was more than weather. It was a brutal, existential test of loyalty and human endurance. But even for the most vigilant guard, the cold always found a way in. It brought a hidden, silent danger that claimed lives every single winter, a danger recorded in the medical diaries of the court. Health consequences were inevitable. Chronic coughs, joint pain and winter fevers plagued residents of the palace. The cold was a constant medical adversary, referred to in Chinese medicine as cold damage, Shanghan. The court diaries of the Ming Emperor Wanli record him suffering severe winter illnesses each year, worsened by the cold, damp air of Beijing's stone palaces. Remedies included hot medicinal broths, ginger teas and warming stools. These offered temporary relief, but carried the constant risk of smoke and burns. Even with layers of quilts and vigilant servants, imperial palaces could not escape winter's grip. The cold claimed lives each year, and not only among the poor. Infants, whose bodies lost heat quickly, and the elderly were especially at risk. Records from the Northern Wei and later dynasties show clear spikes in winter mortality. Many deaths blamed not on plague or famine, but simply on relentless exposure. Without modern medicine, a simple chill could turn deadly. Pneumonia, bronchitis or fevers spread rapidly. Once illness set in, survival was uncertain. Even emperors were not immune. Court diaries record rulers relying on hot broths, ginger tonics and herbal remedies just to stay ahead of the deadly cough. Palaces might have glittered with gold and jade, but their grandeur did not guarantee warmth or safety. Winter in northern China was merciless. Architecture itself began to adapt. Influenced by feng shui principles of harmony and shelter, later designs in the Forbidden City integrated more Kang system. Rooms were designed with thick interior partitions, creating smaller, more heat-retentive spaces. Floors were layered with felt mats. Windows were covered with oiled paper to block drafts. Still, none of this transformed palaces into warm sanctuaries. The strategy rested on layering everything, layering clothing, bedding, fires, and people. Luxury softened the edges, but it could not erase the danger. It only brought them degrees of warmth, just enough to keep breath from freezing in the air. So the ultimate question remains, how did people sleep in imperial castles without freezing to death? The truth is, they barely did. They relied on heated Kang beds, glowing braziers, and heavy quilts. They wrapped heads and hands, sealed necks, and shared warmth. Guards marched the walls until dawn. Servants dozed upright beside stoves, ready to feed fires. And through this constant, grueling battle, they endured. Today, when we step into the Forbidden City, we see grandeur in red pillars and golden tiles. But behind those walls, survival was nightly work. The cold did not respect the emperor in his silk or the guard in his padding. What saved them was not comfort, but fierce determination, adaptation, and the relentless, unseen labour of those who kept the fires alive in the dark. So, would you survive a night in the Forbidden City? Or would the palace itself become your tomb? Subscribe to unlock more interesting truths history often hides.